Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Susanna Imaginario. Susanna, how are you today?
Hello, Daniel. I am good, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is quite the opportunity. And yeah, it feels great.
Well, I'm excited. It's funny because I try to talk to authors on here all the time or privately. I'm like, book covers are really a big deal. Um,
Mhm.
as somebody who's taught design, my mom's a interior designer, like she taught me design for a long time. I feel like I have more of an eye for it than most people, but there are just certain things that really stand out to me with certain book covers. So, like we said, like I said before we got recording, somebody had retweeted, one of yours, and I was just like, that's super cool. So that immediately made me check out your blurb. I'm like, okay, this is the type of author that I want to interview on the podcast. I love the mythology aspect, particularly when people are writing it, in fantasy, urban fantasy, or sci-fi. So I'm trying to do the same thing myself. So, as soon as I read your blurb, I'm like, okay, check, check, check. Let's do this. So I'm so glad that I
Excellent.
could message you. You were the first one in that wave that I sent out actually to finish off season 2 that responded back. So I felt a lot better about Twitter at that point. That's excellent. Well, I'm glad to have you on. We'll start there with that first question there, Susanna. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Hard, very, very hard.
You know,
Um, a uphill struggle, as they say. Well, I've written 5 books in 3 years, so it was exhausting. It
yeah.
was very hard. Um, not just writing the books and everything, all the issues that come with writing a book that not in your native language, because of course I had to make it harder. But just navigating this um, being an author, being a self-published author, all this marketing, all these even the interviews and the social media, and learning how to promote your work. Yeah, that's been really, really hard.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for it. Just now we were talking, I don't have a newsletter. No, it was one of the things at the beginning. It was a choice. It wasn't by ignorance or anything. I realized, well, I personally don't care much about newsletters, so I figured my readers wouldn't either. And my time was quite limited. I could write the book, or I could write the newsletter.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I prioritized the books, and it's been a learning journey, very hard, and few disappointments along the way, but many surprises. I got to meet amazing people as well, and yeah, learning. I've been learning a lot. It's a whole different life, hmm from what I was used to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the newsletter thing has been a huge debate. And it's so funny to me because like, you'll hear one indie author be like, "Oh, I live and die by my newsletter." And then you'll get somebody like I believe Michael R. Fletcher doesn't use a newsletter. And I mean, you look at his Obsidian Path series and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're doing pretty well, So
Yeah.
at the same time, he was on Wizards, Words and Words, helping host and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know, he does certain things. So it's really interesting. It's interesting debate. I still see people don't do it and do amazing. I see other people, they're like, oh, I'll never not do it. I sign up for quite a few just so I can see what, different people have done. And it's very interesting. There are some where I'm like, oh, I really don't want this newsletter anymore. Like I'll just like kind of put it to spam. But there are others that I'm like, oh, this is like really helpful. And for me, I'm always like, well, what's the difference? And I think it's like anything, right? Like you really need to, like, if you're gonna do it, you need to figure out what works for you, but also what works for your readers. Like I had somebody where I signed up, and now they're kind of a bigger name, but I mean, they like sent me something like every probably 3 days. I mean, it was just I had to stop. I was like, this is just, and it was almost the same information like day by day. And I was like, this is just too much. And then there's other people like my friend Mark Timoney who really only send them out bi-weekly at the most when he's got something new, but he does them pretty well. But yeah, it's interesting, right? What works for one person doesn't work for another, but
Yeah,
particularly the community.
interesting is a word. It would be nice to actually to have some concrete stuff that that it's going to work.
Yeah.
I'm always trying new things. I'm not afraid, to try new things. And for the life of me, I see things working with one author, so I'll go and try to do the same, and it backfires, horribly. And other times I do things just okay, sure, why not? And then it works, and then I have to do it more. But that's not what I want to do. Um, yeah, if there's a pattern to it, if I would love to know what is the trick.
I think that's why we're all here, right? And it's funny that you mentioned that because I had talked a little bit with Lucy McLaren about this yesterday in our interview, and then Erica Evren, and we talked about that, where it's like it's so hard to figure out that pattern, and like TikTok's great, don't get me wrong, Bookstagram's great, don't get me wrong, but most of us don't blow up off of those, like most of us have to actually, it's almost like you're an old school salesman, going from door to door, like here's my book, and I met one author recently where I'm like, how do you approach this whole thing? And he's been pretty successful and is like on the rise, I would say. And he's like, well, I literally just see it one reader at a time. He's like, a lot of people, you know, try to have their book seen, which is I still do. He's like, but I don't get discouraged when it's not seen by a million views or whatever. And we
Mhm.
talked a lot about the TikTok algorithm. And we said, like we on here, we always talk about 5 and 10%, because that's what Amazon's really into. And it's really with that whole, like if you can get 200 views, well, that's like I'll put, this interview on, part of the clips and things on TikTok. Well, some I've gotten, per the 3 times I'll do is like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, to help with the audio and the video. And I mean, sometimes it's, anywhere from 400 to 700 people if you add all three TikToks together, and the average is about 200 to 220, 250. Well, that's that many more people that just by me taking, a few minutes each day and just putting a couple of pictures on, the link to
Mhm.
this and, your website, that all of a sudden, like, who knows, like out of that 700, you could get 50 people going to your website. And even if you get 20, 25 readers, well, even if you get, let's say 5 to 10 of those readers are now, they love
Mhm.
your books, and are now readers for life. Well, that was a really simple thing that, that I did or you
Mhm.
did, and I think that a lot of times he said, like we take that for granted. He's like, I'm just trying to build a reader at a time. He goes, if I can get 5, then, or 10, especially from one thing that I do, he's like, I feel a lot more better, I feel a lot better about that. Because some of these people with a million, it's like, yeah, it's great, but it's not the majority of us. So I think,
Mhm.
like you said, like trying to find what works for you, and sometimes things work here and sometimes they don't. Like I've done that for the podcast, like Twitter, I used to get like 150 downloads before 9 a.m. By hitting up Australia's time zone the day before and doing self promo Saturday. And now yesterday we were at like 4. I got more today than I did from yesterday's self promo. Like, that used to work really well. It doesn't now. So now I have to now Instagram's doing a little bit better. So I got to go back to, it's like my friend's like, he's like, it's like an ocean and a ship. You're just riding the wave to
It's
try and
a
get to the,
lot of work.
yeah.
You spend more time doing that than actually writing, or yes,
Yeah.
that is the problem. I haven't ventured into TikTok yet. I created an account, watched a few videos, and ran. Figure no, I would rather go back to YouTube. Um, but more and more, I see the pressure, especially because apparently it works. The more than other platforms. So I am maybe one of those things for 2023 will be to venture into TikTok. I don't know.
Well, if you
Yeah.
are on TikTok and you find me for author Daniel Kubal,
Yeah.
I like I said, like I like everything, particularly for alum, but anybody for books, that I'm interested in, because it's kind of hard. Like I'm not really into nothing against anybody, unless you're, like paranormal romance, unless it has paranormal in it.
Mhm.
I want those fantastical elements. That's just what I read, so that's what I want on my TikTok. So some
Mhm.
of those things, some of the spicy books, unless they're fantasy or sci-fi, I'm like, yeah, okay. But I in particular, if it's got fantasy or sci-fi at all, or horror, historical fiction or fantasy, I mean, I like and reshare everything. So some of my friends are like, you have reposted every video that I posted within the last 2 weeks. I'm like, yep, not sorry. I'm like, that's how many people might see, your TikTok. So I think and it's nice for me because then I get more authors who I like, and the kind of books I like on my TikTok. So I do have to say, in terms of Facebook, like I said before we got recording, this has been doing better with, their algorithm. Like I got a lot of fantasy and sci-fi horror authors now
Mhm.
that are
Mhm.
popping up for my sponsored ads. Um, but yeah, TikTok, their algorithm does a pretty darn good job. Yeah, like, even if you only get 200 views, but like if people are, if you're working it right, you can really, start to find yourself a good community and share things back and forth. So I do highly recommend it. I don't think everybody's going to get it. I still post this, stuff about our episode, like I'll do in the spring on there. I'm still hoping that somebody that I posted interview gets 1 million views, because I know that's going to translate to book sales. That's why but I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, well, if we can get Susanna, 800 people, viewing her books, I put your book covers right on there in the TikTok. So if we can get them seeing
Very
800 people
happy.
see your product, yeah. Because imagine trying to do that at a show or a con, right? Like, it's great to do, but it's like how many people are you actually seeing? That might be a whole weekend, versus
Mhm.
just one little click, and you can get that. Imagine if you did that 3 times a week, I mean, all of a sudden, then you're into maybe 3,000 people, have seen those. So it gets kind of interesting after a while. But
Mhm.
and for our audience, what genre or genres do you currently write in, and why?
Well, uh, initially, to put it into context, so Timelessness was originally just Weird Gods. Weird Gods was this massive draft that I wrote, and it was part of a trilogy because, like all fantasy authors, they get carried away. And then
Amen.
when I when I decided to self-publish, I realized that I couldn't afford the editing. And a friend advised me, well, you should turn it into a series, at least that you can at least publish one book a year and you get momentum, etc., etc. So it took a bit of a lot of revision, to be fair, but that's what I did. I started, so Weird Gods, they had all the same story pretty much until the middle of Anamnesis. And then the rest kind of had to patch it up together at the end. And anyway, um, I kind of lost track. What was the question?
Oh, what genre or genres do you currently write in, and why?
Yes. Sorry. So the idea was to with Gods was Slipstream,
Mm,
but once it came out, for the life of me, I always had to explain what it was.
mm.
So I just simplified into mythological fantasy or mythological science fantasy,
Oh,
um, or just these days it's just fantasy because it's simple. But the original idea was to create something different. Everyone says, well, write a book you'd like to read.
yeah.
That's what I did. I wanted to create a puzzle book. I wanted to create a book that had elements from fantasy, from mythology, from science fiction, from horror, mystery, literary fiction. I want it all. And well, I'm not saying that I succeeded because it's my first book, so it's quite flawed in some aspects, But uh, I succeeded in some aspects, failed in others, but that was the idea. It got the best thing about dividing it into several books was that, okay, the first one, but then I had time to revise the second and the third and the fourth, so it gets better. I think by the middle of Nephilim X, it's Slipstream. So it's getting there. So yeah, that was the original idea.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, well, I definitely understand that. There were a couple of things there where, like my friend, he was always teasing me because I was like, I'm just going to do novella of my own fantasy world. And now that book is turned into a trilogy, and I'm like about to be done with draft two's outline, and hopefully be done with that by the spring and send it to betas and then an editor. And he was just teasing me yesterday. He's like, I thought that was, he goes, how's your novella coming? He always says, he goes, how's your novella coming? So just to spite him, in my urban fantasy, I broke up three different short stories into three prequel novellas. So he's always teasing me. He's like, "Where's that? How's that short story coming?" I'm like, "Shut up,"
Exactly.
So I definitely understand that one. But it's interesting, though. I do want to point out, because you're one of several authors that have said this within the last couple of weeks. Actually, it's funny how like people kind of get clumped together. It must be like a thing. But you mentioned, having to split your book up because of editing costs. Um,
Mm,
and that's where like I find myself, and I'm like, well, I want to get certain stories out there. And we had it's kind of like a marketing scheme where we're like, okay, well, we could do an anthology. And then I was looking into prices. I was like, well, it actually is cheaper for me to break this up into three prequel novellas, already have them beta readed, then edited separately, and then put together as a final product. And then I'll have four products instead of three. So I just want to point out to the audience that, if something you're looking at doesn't working, you could always do something like that, or do what you did, and break up that bigger work. Like you said, it took a lot of work and a lot of revision. But at the
mhm.
same time, I do think that I've seen quite a few authors do that, and do a lot better, because instead of just having one product, then you have multiple. So I think that that's smart. Do you think that that worked better for you then, like in terms of getting a readership, or?
Well, we'll never know. Uh, I had more time to experiment.
Mm,
I didn't do any marketing or advertising for the first book,
gotcha.
pretty much at all. So that was a big mistake. I did a little bit more with the other one. So with each publication, um, I got more sales and more visibility. And now I'm trying to market the series as a whole.
Mm,
Uh, I'm even thinking of releasing a new edition of it all, just in print. Um,
cool.
but who knows? That is part of the secret project that we kind of talked about.
Oh yeah, yeah.
We'll see. There's been an opportunity that I can't turn down, I don't think. So it gives more options, because if you only have one book and you release the book, and if the book fails, there's no sequel, there's no alternative. What we're gonna do? You're gonna take it out of print, or you just unpublish it, change the title, change the cover, try again. I know some people do that, but yeah, I I didn't want to do that. I'm here for the long run.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it was fine to work and learn little by little every year. That was my goal. I wanted to publish one book every year. And I managed to do that. Even got a little novella in between that
oh,
started
cool.
as just a chapter and turned into 20,000 words. So I was like, sure, why not? Um, and yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And if it was the right choice, but I'll never know. Some people tell me, no, you did it all wrong. You should have started, create your social media accounts long before you even started writing. But when I started writing, I wasn't concerned about all those things. I wasn't even thinking about publishing or marketing. I was just, the things that I was worried about was, grammar, how to get the story across, how to
Yeah,
build this character. So
yeah, yeah.
um, in hindsight, yeah, sure, so many things I could have done better or could have gone differently, but um, it, there's no point even considering it. I am here now, and
Yeah.
the next book will be, I'm already talking about it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
so it probably will come out in 10 months, but I'm already talking about it. So if at least I'm doing that right now, I don't know. Just
I feel-
you, every time you just do better, and you know better, and you continue.
my friend said it's a lot like parenting. He's like, you don't know what you're doing until you made a mistake. He goes, then you hopefully go back and fix it and don't ruin your kid too much. And he goes, that's how I feel about my books. I was like, Yeah, it's fair.
Well, parenting must be harder because you can always go back and edit your books, or no, you can't go back and edit your kid.
I was stunned when he said that. I was like, what? Yeah, it was really funny. He goes, yeah, that's where I'm at, and he goes, in publishing and in life with my kids. So it was really funny. But yeah, it's just I've seen a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people recently. At least 5 authors within the last month, I would say, who did not do what you did, who just did the one bigger book, and
Mhm.
you know and they had newsletters, they had these things, and it just did not do well. So
Mhm.
they cut it apart, did all that work that you did, and then
Mhm.
rebranded, and then did some other things, and that seemed to work a lot better for each of them. So I
Okay.
just was curious. I just personally think I think that was a really good idea on your
Mhm.
part personally, because I've seen that for many authors over the last year and a half, where that just worked a lot better for them, particularly if they didn't have a big newsletter, or following, or didn't have whatever, like Travis. I was talking about Travis on here, who wrote Legends and Lattes. Like he was an amazing audible narrator, right? Did that for 7 years. Obviously knew a lot of people from the book community, and then writes his book in 3 months, and then it does super well. And I'm just like, well, but that's not most people. Like most people
Exactly. Yeah.
have to do X, Y, and Z like us, and so I just think that like you talked, we said earlier in question one, right? You really need to think about what works best for you, and then and then go from there. But it is interesting. It seems like it's a market trend where people want more products, like people. That's where like we were like, well, do I do an anthology, or do I all of a sudden do three and do a special edition anthology? And then we were like, well, we can make some money back. Like I found out, I was really happy. CT Phillips, who I had on here before, he actually messaged me like a pre-made cover site, which actually I really liked your colors, I have to say.
Everything is
For
color
Weird Guys.
coded.
Oh man. So I that was like on my mind. So I do have to say, I do have to tell you firsthand, I stole your color scheme a little bit. I love the opposing colors there. And I was able to find one, we were able to find a couple with the opposing colors. And I was like, oh, this would be so cool, to do for, the different ones, because there's a lot of, I just love the opposition of, forces, yin and yang and stuff. So I just was like, I said to my friend, I was like, well, I'm interviewing Susanna, and this is her cover. I'm like, I just love having, like, we have like a really cool blue and yellow that we found, which was really cheap, over like a sword or whatever. And I was like, it's
Mhm.
minimalistic, but I'm like, it's really cool. So I think we're gonna go with that. And then we have like the opposing ones on the other ones.
Well,
But
you should. I'm a huge fan of simplicity.
yeah, yeah,
Classic stuff.
yep,
You can't go wrong. You know, orange, blue. You can't go wrong. It's the classic. It's
yeah,
We always respond to that, and then
yeah, yeah,
yeah, the whole series, the whole covers, more than the images in the covers, the colors
yeah,
was
yeah.
very important to me. Even in the books, color is important to some
Oh,
degree,
cool.
and everything is symbolic. So I do pay a lot of attention to that, and I'm flattered that you like the cover so much, and you're gonna
Oh,
adapt.
it was cool. It
Right.
was cool. I showed it to my buddy. He's like, "Oh, that is really neat." Because we're always, the two of them are always, they're part of my readership, right? Like they ingest a lot of different fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. And they're the audience that I want. And they're also really good friends, because if something's really crappy, like I'm like, "Hey, check out this cover." They're like, "I don't like it." Or if I'm like, "Hey, read this," they're like, "Yeah, we hated that, and it's because of X, Y, and Z." Or I really like that. Like if they like something, I know that like they're the particular community I want to, part of the community I want to attract.
Mhm.
Like that. But yeah, they were both like really liked your covers. So yeah, one of them was like, "Yep, I already got Weird Gods." So I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
cool. Uh, we got one for you, Susanna.
you
So
got one.
yeah, I got you in my cart actually. And my mom, she's so funny, because I'm like, I just want, yeah, my family knows me. I'm like, I just want Amazon Kindle cards at this point. I used to want like Barnes and Noble and stuff, but we're running out of room at my house because of the baby. And I
Mhm.
bought many books the last couple of years from friends. So there's a lot of indie community down here, guys. Let me tell you. But Kindle's like my new thing. Been really into it. So she's like, "Oh, your present's on the way." I'm like, "Oh yes." I'm like, by like Tuesday, all of them in my cart, I should be able to get onto my Kindle. So it's in my cart. So as soon as I read that in the spring and get to review that, I'm doing a lot of reviews for the channel. I got a lot more time on my hands because I'm retracting a lot of my
Mhm,
jobs, side gigs and
mhm.
things like that. So I'm really excited to read Weird Gods and then have it on the channel. So as soon as that's up, I'll let you know. They're all gonna, just for the audience and for you, are gonna be no spoilers. I can't stand when people do that and then don't to let you know. So I don't do that. But maybe, maybe in this, in the summer we could have you on for season 3 and do a spoiler. That'd be really cool.
Yes.
So after I read Weird Gods.
Well, that'll give me enough time to read your book as well. So,
Oh man, yeah. So
good.
yeah, I went to send the beta out to just a few people, and then I'm so glad I didn't get like my actual beta list ready yet. I have people that I have to contact. So I'm going through and I'm just formatting on Word because I just figured I'd send it. A lot of people just want it as a Word document. And so I go to send it to my 3 friends who are part of my betas. And I'm looking at this one chapter and I'm like, where are like 3,000 words? I can't find it anywhere.
Oh
Like,
no.
I'm like, so I like had a friend that was going to help me edit, and I'm like, well, now I have to like rewrite it next week just for that section. So I was so disappointed. I was like, okay, this product is not done. So I like have to go back because I have halfway done with draft 1 for prequel novella 2 and 3. I have like really outlined and stuff. But yeah, I'll send it to you. I was so disappointed in myself. I was like, seriously. So yeah, it was just want everybody to know in the audience, you got to really make sure that have multiple copies, digital copies of it. Otherwise, you're going to be in the same boat as me.
Have a copy of a copy of a copy,
Yep.
and then you can do. I hope you don't do what I did. My worst blunder. So I've never lost any chapters. Fortunately, I always have copies of copies of copies because I'm that paranoid. But it was about 6 months ago. I don't know how I managed to. I was uploading. So when after I published the last book, I had it all. No, I had a collection of typos and things that over the years people have pointed out. So I, went through all the files, corrected everything, and then uploaded them again. Or so I thought. But such is my organization skills that I managed to upload the original versions, the ones with all the typos. And so for about 2 months, they were for sale like that before, because then people contacted me and say, "Oh, there's a typo here." I corrected that already. And seriously, I I part of me just collapsed that day. I
Yeah,
was almost catatonic and just so yeah, that was bad. So there is such a thing as too many copies.
yeah.
I had them all in the same. I don't know what I was thinking. So instead of 2022 or 20, I don't know what I did. I don't know. Anyway, it's all fixed now. I promise.
Yeah,
But that was bad. Anyway, so
it made me feel
and
better about
everyone has other stories.
yeah. Well, there was some where I'm like, one of my friends was like, oh, I don't remember what happened, but his was up there for like 4 months like that. And he was just like, he goes, I guess that says a lot that so many people bought the book and just didn't care. But it was like, it made me look so, he goes, I can't believe that people left it up there for 4 months. He goes, nobody contacted me. And I'm like, I
That's
go,
true. I
fine,
mean,
yeah, I guess.
it wasn't that bad. It was just a few typos,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
still, for us, at least for me
Oh
as an
yeah,
author,
yeah, yeah.
especially, I take great care because I
Oh, for
know
sure.
not being an English native, it's the same in every writer group, in every conversation with writers. And even just talking, sometimes I make the grammar mistake, and they go like, "Well, you do that, and then your book's this and that," and it's always the thing they're gonna nitpick about. You know, it's it's a draft, for crying out loud. Tell me about the characters. Tell me
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the
yeah,
pacing.
yeah.
There's typos. Yes, it's a draft. Move on. But no, it's always the same that they go. So I really tried to make sure that it was clean. And after 3 years, finally, I think I caught them all. And then that happens, and it was such a slap in the face. It's like, oh. So, but in a way, it kind of cured me because now I'm a bit more relaxed about it. I see, I see authors doing mistakes all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
why not?
yeah,
We write the most, so of course we're going to make the most typos.
yeah, yeah. That's true.
And yeah, if you can't, if that makes me a bad writer, then well, fine. Um,
I never realized that. That
I
is
give up.
yeah. You're right. The most you're gonna make if you're doing something the most, you're gonna make the most mistakes. So that
Yeah.
actually makes me feel a lot better now about all my mistakes I made. That's funny. Well, we'll go with that third one there, Susanna, which is actually my favorite one to talk about people and their works in particular. So I was curious at what is your timelessness? What are your timelessness books about, and how did you come up with this idea?
Oh, this is the hardest question to
Yep,
answer.
always.
Actually, I wrote it down a bit because, well, I have answered similar questions many times, and it's always hard because timelessness is a compilation of 20 years worth of ideas.
Oh wow.
So it's very hard to pinpoint. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
oh, I have this idea, I'm going to write this book. No, it's been in the works for about 20 years. It's a combination of my love for mythology and psychology and just the weird in general. And if we're going to pick an origin, it started um, it started as a time travel story, so alternative history story about time traveling to trees. There was this tree at a graveyard in Oxford where I used to live before moving here. And this yew tree with hollow inside. And I would just spend a lot of time there when I was walking my dog and just think, oh, it would be a cool idea, probably inspired by, Outlander or something, if you can travel through stones, why not trees?
Yeah.
And the first draft of Weird Gods as it was based on that, on going back into, I did a whole research of the oldest trees in the world and where they were located and then et cetera, et cetera. And I had to stop because I realized I was spending more time doing the research than actually writing the book.
Yeah.
And the book itself sucked because all I was doing was the old trope of, oh, let's go back to the past, change things, shit happens, you have to go back and put it back together. No. So I went back to my roots. And one of the first stories I wrote, I was about 12, 13, was about gods and aliens. It was this this mashup of Greek and Norse mythology when they encounter a different pantheon that are actually aliens and
Oh, that's cool.
very outlandish. I don't have a copy of it, sadly, but the idea always stick with me. And
Mm.
I used to kind of write just as thought exercises, conversations between
Yeah,
gods. Um,
that's cool.
yeah, for no reason. I just like to play with characters, when just the way my mind works. And so I combined that with gods, and it still wasn't working. I like it better because one of the things that puts me off about modern day tales of mythology is when you bring the gods into our reality, into our present, they always feel diminished to me. That something is lost. So I had to write about mythology in their environment
Mm.
and still make it, outlandish or, sci-fi enough to be appealing, because otherwise, again, it has been done before. The myths
Yeah.
exist. I wanted something beyond that, and I needed a third ingredient. So here comes androids and the undead, which was part of a little horror story that I wrote again back in high school, about these undead creatures not quite zombies, not quite ghosts. You'll see the dark one are quite different. And then, yeah, I just combined it all
Mm.
um, with an end goal. And it is a lot. Um, I took a lot of shortcuts. Um, Half my cast being gods, everyone has an idea of no, thanks to Marvel, everyone now has an idea of most of them. And yeah, just cook it all together: gods, aliens, androids, undead, and timelessness was born.
Oh, that's cool. That's a pretty good crock pot right there. If you're
It
into
is, it is, yeah.
sci-fi. You said some words there, some key words there, as my friend always likes to say, my teaching friend, where people are going to perk up and be like, "Oh, that's really cool." So yeah, well, I just really liked when like I said, after I saw your cover, I really liked your blurb. I was like, yeah, this is definitely for me. I always really love. There's a Stargate SG-1 episode, where the oh my god, why can't I think of? I'm trying to think what character it was now. It wasn't Thor, but it was like one of the Asgardians that was dressed like Thor. And
No,
more
it was Thor,
was
yeah.
it Thor? Okay, I thought
Literally, yeah.
I was getting my TV shows mixed up. I just thought like I thought that was so cool, and yeah, and I really liked in Agents of Shield, where they have like the spear, and yeah, they're like it's like an ancient spear, but really it's an Asgardian weapon, more powerful Asgardian weapon, and I just thought that was so cool because there are like some interesting
Mhm.
historical accounts of, one, Viking warrior with a very interesting spear. And then they go to the actual fortress. And it's interesting to me because I had went to a talk with one of the archaeologists that went, and there's actually calcified glass there, which makes you wonder, like, did he have a spear? Like, like
Yeah.
that did something really cool. Like, because why would there be calcified glass on all these strategic points? And it'd
Mhm.
be just like you were, invading this fortress. So to me, it was just so interesting when they did the Marvel story, because then I found out through a comic book friend of mine that whoever had originally written that for Marvel had apparently like listened to the same archaeologist that I did and watched the same documentary on that battle. So it was cool. So when I was reading, your blurb, I was thinking of the Stargate SG-1 episode and the Asgardians, and I was thinking of the Marvel and that. So
That's excellent.
oh, that's cool.
Stargate was a huge influence, especially Stargate Atlantis.
Oh yeah, it's funny because that's what Erica Ebram was just saying to me yesterday afternoon, and that's one that I haven't gone back and rewatched recently. It's actually in my queue. I just been so busy with everything, especially writing and stuff. So it's actually in my queue for when the baby comes. I got that. And a couple other shows where Farscape's another one.
Starscape, oh, huh? Yeah.
I think the one that I watched actually, I always thought I watched the original with my grandpa. I don't think I did. I think we watched what was it, the Farscape, the Fomorian Wars, or whatever the one was after that. It was
No, I
like,
haven't yet.
yeah, it was
Very hard
interesting.
to get now. I can't
Yeah,
find.
well, they actually have it on the Roku channel, and then it's also on. I want to say it was on Amazon Prime, but they didn't have the newer one.
Not in Ireland.
But yeah, it was interesting. I was like, "This is for free." I was like, "We've been trying to find, like hoping somebody made a DVD collection at some point, but
Mhm.
as far as I know, they haven't yet." Yeah, so it's interesting. You have to like actually find a place to stream them, and yeah, it's really hard. But yeah, that's in my queue because I'm like, oh, that really, especially the newer Farscape, the one that came after that, it was like that was the one on the Sci-Fi channel that really got me interested. That, and then I remember Stargate SG-1 in particular. But yeah, Stargate Atlantis I started to watch, and then I think I ended up, I don't know what had going on those couple of years. I must have been, in high school or something and working and, hanging out and doing whatever around town. But yeah, that's one I definitely want to go back to. I love the whole Atlantis thing. So anytime you can bring in, sci-fi into that mythology, to me is really cool. So well, that sounds awesome. I'm really excited about that. Again, absolutely love the cover there. So that really gave me some really cool ideas. Um,
I never actually answered the question. So to
oh,
summarize, timelessness, all that cooked together. but you can summarize it as Psyche's, the goddess of the Greek goddess of the soul, journey through the Norse underworld.
Oh,
So the tagline for the series that just finally got it settled is Psyche needs to find her way out of Niflheim before the end of eternity. And yes, that kind of explains it all pretty much. It is a very introspective um, journey,
mm.
lots of metaphor, lots of stuff happening that you don't know if they're real or if they're dreaming or if
Oh,
I don't
that's
know
cool.
if they're imagining. Yeah, it's Psyche's journey through the Norse hell, pretty much. So.
Hmm. If anybody needs anything other than that, you're probably on the wrong podcast. So
Yeah, it doesn't get much weirder, you know.
yeah, that's
Exactly.
awesome. I love the title too, like Weird Gods. That to me, like I was just like, God,
Mm.
that's such a cool title.
It
Yeah, I
was
really
the thing that I was saddest about when I had to divide the books. I had to come
that
up with titles for the other books.
makes sense. Yeah.
It just I wanted Weird Gods to be the name of the series, but then it would just be too confusing. So I just went with Timelessness. But Weird Gods was I have my husband to thank for that. Actually, it was his suggestion,
Oh, okay.
uh, making a pun because he's a huge Terry Pratchett fan.
Yeah, yeah.
It came from there. So like, well, yeah, that actually fits. So yeah, I was very proud of that.
Yeah, it's cool. I love Terry Pratchett. The Color of Magic had to be one of the best books I've read like ever. So I actually have I have a bunch of the other ones, and I feel like I got really distracted with my own writing. So that's another one. I bought like 10 of them right in a row, and I had to go back to them. But yeah, that was really
There
good.
to find the time.
Yeah, I know, right? Especially well, I said to my friend, I was like, my reading is really taking a hit. And he's like, Dan, in a little over a year, you have 2 seasons worth of a podcast. And then he's like, you also have, several books that are, the draft's done. He goes, you have 3 others that are halfway done. I'm like, he goes, you have probably 20 outlines. I'll never be done with. I love when people are like, "Oh, I have writer's block." I'm like, "Nope." I'm like, I always have too much to write. I just go from one project to another, so I at least get something done, inching. But yeah, I was like, okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. But yeah, it's definitely a series I have to go back to. So when it comes to your world building, what steps do you take to make your world feel unique?
Well, I already answered part of that. Basically, to to simplify, I used Greek mythology. I took most aspects from Greek mythology, and I used Norse cosmology because I love Greek mythology. I love the gods, love the stories, but in terms of world building, is very limited. It's a Mediterranean. There's not much going on. Meanwhile, in Norse mythology, you have the 9 worlds,
Yeah.
so many possibilities. So I figured, well, we're going to do that. And then, yes, then I added androids and the undead to the mix. The undead, because of course we were in the underworld, and aliens, because we always have to have aliens for me. Yeah, so I think that made it pretty unique.
Yeah.
There's also, it's all based on realms. So there's also the realm of dreams, the realm of, yeah. But if you're gonna visualize it, just imagine a Greek myth happening somewhere in Niflheim. It's, I think, yeah,
Oh,
sums it up.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That is very unique. I mean, I feel like that really, because if you said Nordic mythology, I feel like people are like, oh, okay, that's been done. But if you explain it like you just did, you're like, okay, that has not been done. Like that really, but it's nice
So
because
much to explore.
yeah, and you have a lot of character and world building when you talk about those things, I think already done in people's minds, like I think you easily set reader expectation right away
Mhm.
if you explain it that way. So yeah, that's a good combination right there. I think if you put those things separately, I don't, on a list, I don't know if I would have put them together. So I think that you know, that makes a really interesting recipe. I think again using I'm hungry because I haven't had breakfast yet, so clearly it's seeping in. And we're crock potting later today to get ahead for the week. Sunday's a crock pot day, so that's my metaphor for today, I guess. But yeah, I think that makes a really interesting recipe for really good world building. And you already have some. I mean, you have so many great stories, right? And people, and um,
Mhm.
you know, there's just I feel like there's so much you could pull on there, and
Yeah, that's why I said I took a lot of shortcuts. Basically, everything happens after what we know about mythology, so
Mm,
thousands of years in the future. So I tried to write it in a way that if you don't know anything about mythology, you'd still understand the story. But it is true that those who do know the stories, the myths, either Greek or Norse, they will understand the book a lot better. They would catch all the little Easter eggs hidden here and there.
mm,
So, yeah, um, I'm not saying that I regret it because I didn't want to rewrite the myths.
mm,
But looking back, if there was one thing that I would pinpoint as, oh, I could have done this better, would be a bit more um, kind for the readers that don't know anything,
yeah,
um, and just dive in completely lost. It will everything will make sense in the end, I promise. But I do understand when people sometimes come to me and say, this I'm so lost, it's so confusing. I don't understand this book at
yeah.
all, and I understand why they don't understand. All I can say is, well, persevere. It will make sense. Um, but yeah, I could have made it easier. But
Mm, That's
no,
interesting.
live and learn.
Yeah. Amen to that. I feel like I'm learning all the time. So when it comes to exciting characters that readers can relate to, what do you do to ensure that readers will be able to connect with them and then cheer them on in your story or boo them?
Um, well, mm, kind of like the world building, I cheat. So I already said that half the cast is figures that we already kind of know, or at least we recognize the names, and other part of the cast, they are based on archetypes. So because it is all very allegorical, I do cheat a lot in that regard. If you go and study the characters, you can line them up perfectly with certain archetypes. Other than that, and especially, because then there's the other, you know, it's helpful that way, but then you have to work with the expectations people have of the characters.
Yeah.
Everyone expects Zeus to be a certain way and Loki to be another, thanks to Marvel. And you have to really give them character, otherwise. So I just I I make them as flawed and complex and flawed and reliable as possible. Um, I make them ambiguous. I make them petty. Their motivations sometimes are hard to understand. They are not human motivations, but at the same time, you can understand. I try to put the reader in their point of view. Imagine yourself if you were, had all this power, all this talent. You can do whatever you want, and suddenly you can't, or you can, but you shouldn't. How do you go about justifying the things you do or don't do? What motivates you after thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of existence? You will be bored. What else is there to do? All those things. And so it is hard to come up with all those scenarios, but at the same time, at the heart of it, they are very flawed, very human, and everyone can relate with that, with whatever need each has. For example, Loki is not just the Marvel trickster. I made a conscious decision to make it a bit more faithful to the mythology. So he's a father,
Mm,
he's very concerned with Fenrir and Hel and Jormungand. And and I remember at the time when I started writing the first draft, I was part of this writing group, and people came to me and say, "Hey, this is a huge mistake. You can't portray Loki as a father. It's not going to work. You can't make it sexy and a father. You can't make the trickster and have him feel responsible for some." And I left the group because I was like, no, this is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
Let other people, write Loki however they want, sexy and sexy, crazy, whatever. This is my Loki.
Yeah.
And he still has all the trickster characteristics, but it was very important that his redeeming quality, so to speak, would be that he is a father.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's something that people
That's
can relate to. Yeah, being a sexy god trickster heartthrob, probably not, but being
Mhm.
a father and having his own machinations to help his kids or whatever. I mean, more people can relate to that, I feel like. So I think that
It made him a lot more dangerous, serious as
yeah,
well. He's still the prankster, but there's a lot more to it, and the chaos that ensues from it, it's at a much larger scale, I think. But no spoilers.
yeah.
Um, so getting into spoiler territory. Um, but yeah, I love as well to make them more reliable. I always give them the benefit of the doubt. So there's always a redeeming quality. There's always something that either I'm not telling or I'm not showing the reader. There's always a motivation. I love when people come to me and say that they've changed allegiances throughout the books without without knowing, who was right or who was wrong, or they're both right, they're both wrong. I don't know what's happening here. And that is life. There's no right and wrong. What is wrong for someone is going to hurt someone else. And yeah, there's a lot of that. And everyone can relate with that. To either be in a position where you are, you know, um, harmed by something, you suffer the consequences of something that had nothing to do with you, or you do something without realizing the consequences that it's going to happen. So
Yeah,
especially, and then when you're dealing with gods, the consequences are massive sometimes.
yeah, yeah,
So that's how I make them relatable. Small scale, big scale, it's all the same.
yeah,
It's all decisions, conflict,
yeah, yeah.
flaws.
Well, I think you did the right thing with Loki there. It sounds more interesting. If you see the same thing over and over again, it's like, okay, well, I just it gets boring after a while. I think that's why I like a lot of different fantasy and sci-fi books, because people have, particularly indie, I think people have really, they're like, I've seen this 100 times, and there are certain things I liked of it, but I want to do this. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
understand that. I'm like, I like a unique story. If everybody's telling the same story regurgitated over and over again with the same characters the same way, it's like it gets really boring after a while. So, and then people are going to stop reading about those characters. So I think what you did was really
Mhm.
smart. So. Okay, this is an interesting one for you in particular because of your books. So, if you could visit any part of your own fantasy world, where would it be and why?
The nymph's bosom.
Okay.
Uh, it's a very special realm. So the way the world is built, so it's Niflheim, but it's in Asia, which is like a defrosted area of Niflheim due to reasons and things, all where all the Greek mythology creatures inhabit, because otherwise it's too cold. But there's a special realm there where pretty much everyone always ends up, because that's the saying. I created a complex world, but a very small world as well, and I'm always recycling the same locations
Mm,
as the story progresses. So every time there's always differences. The setting, it's almost another character. It
oh,
will
that's
make
cool.
sense when you read it. But
Yeah.
anyway, this particular kind of side is almost created by a different god, and it's always very warm there. There's lots of hot springs and caves, and there's a library, and no one goes there because everyone thinks that it's cursed, which is great. So yes, that's where I would spend most of my time, just in the warmth, in a hot spring with a book. Yeah.
It sounds awesome. Speaking of writing retreat or a gaming retreat, that sounds awesome.
Mhm,
Sounds like a writer's paradise right there. You get a lot of work done there.
mhm.
That's really cool. If you could have any skill or magical power from one of your characters, what would it be and why?
Oh, that is a tricky one. Well, it's not. Um, so the way the magic systems work is, every god has their standard powers, their godlike powers, some more than others. And then every god has a talent, a special talent that, it's not that no one else has, it's just they're very good at it. But I think I would choose the ability to teleport, pretty much,
Oh,
or
that'd be cool.
translocate. I'm sorry, to translocate
Yeah.
everywhere. Most of them can do that, and it would be very useful.
Yeah.
Just, yep, I want to go. For traveling would be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah. Figuring that. Yeah.
just
Yeah.
translocate whatever you wanted. If you were in a social, in an awkward social situation, you could just go.
That's true.
Yes, that would be my ability of choice, I think.
Especially as a
Yeah.
writer, think of how many more books you could sell, right? Like you could go to each writing convention or,
It's just, you
yeah.
know, no losing time. Now it would be great,
Yeah.
and they use it a lot to just get away from bad situations. It's just, oh, sorry, I have to go. I am very jealous of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a good one. I got two nephews in Michigan. My family's there, so if I go, it's a 50-minute. Like I have to drive, at least like here we have flights. It's usually pretty hard in our town, so I have to go to like Syracuse. So I have to like drive an hour, do the thing, and then go and then wait. And so it's usually still even like a 50-minute flight. Still, about a 3.5 hour affair there and then back. And then if I drive, it's 8.5 both ways. So yeah, that would be one that I would really want. I can just be like, "Hey guys, how's it going?" And then come right back and yeah, not have to suffer
Mhm.
the the advents of traveling. So I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, people talk about that. Oh, it's about the journey and not the destination. No, it's about the destination. I love to
Yeah,
travel.
yeah,
I
yeah.
hate airports. I hate.
Yeah.
We recently
Training.
been to Kenya, which
Oh,
was
cool.
amazing. We went
Yeah, yeah.
to a safari, great.
Awesome.
But it took us almost 35 hours to
Oh,
come back
geez. Yeah.
between delays and with 4 airports. I mean, come on, it's just no. It was so draining,
Yeah, yeah.
and unnecessary and exhausting. And yeah, I would love to travel more. But well, there's a financial issue, but even so, I haven't been too far afield because it's just the idea of how long,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
especially now with all
Yep.
these mandates in COVID, and you can't take this, you can't take that, and you have to go to security 10 times. No, it's really
It'd be so much
draining.
easier to boop, 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 boop.
If it was to be faster, you just teleport somewhere. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think yeah, you brought up a good point too. Think of the money you would save. Like you don't have to pay gas or airport fees. Like you just pop in and out. You don't have to worry about the line. You don't have to worry. You can bring your
Yeah.
shampoo with you, a bigger bottle or whatever. Don't have to worry about it. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a very selfish wish, because imagine if everyone had the ability then.
That's true. Yeah, 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 yeah.
But no, that's why we write books about these things,
That's
so
fair.
we can dream.
Totally true. Never thought of it that way. That's awesome. Well, that's a really good one. For that last one, do you have any news, updates, promos, or current projects that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, so I am writing or rewriting a new book, the Obligé.
Hmm.
This was originally written as a sequel to Weird Gods.
Oh, that's cool.
And unlike Weird Gods, it's not going to be divided. I hope not. 6 months from now, or when the interview comes up, I'll probably announce, well, it's too big, I'll have to cut it into. No, right now it's supposed to be a standalone, and I'm keeping it at a reasonable word count.
Mm, mm.
So as a sequel to Weird Gods, follows two of their secondary characters, Seshat and Anubis, which are from the Egyptian pantheon. So there's a little bit of Egyptian mythology
Oh,
there
cool.
as well. And this is going to be more focused on them because I just love having them together. Um, every scene with them, and it's such a pleasure to write. And it was part of the progression. I'm going through all the mythologies. So anyway, it should, and this is a rough plan, it should be done by the end of summer
Mm.
2023. But until then, who knows?
Yeah.
I have a couple short stories, leftovers from Timelessness, that I don't know. It's not enough to do a proper anthology, but they're just a few. So I don't know what I'm going to do with them. Maybe use them as promotion, but keep an eye on my feed since I don't have a newsletter. But I always announce on social media whenever these things show
Oh,
up on
cool.
my website or something. And yeah, maybe, hopefully, um, a full edition of Timelessness, a special edition of Timelessness in paperback, hardback, don't know yet, but it's definitely going to be special
Oh,
and
cool.
very limited, and next year, hopefully.
Oh,
Those are
cool.
the plans. Until then, I don't know, venture into TikTok. I don't know.
Email
We'll
let me
see
know.
about that.
CM Quinn helped me out quite a bit, so it was a lot easier having somebody, help me out. So let me know. I know quite a few, people on there that we could connect you with too. So you don't feel
Yeah,
like you're
no. Maybe the new haircut will help with younger audiences. I don't know.
yeah, yeah,
We'll see.
yeah. My kids are always like, "You got a haircut." I'm like, "Thank you for noticing. Nobody else ever does." I go, "Granted, you see me every day, and you have to, but."
Yeah.
Well, well, Susanna, I really appreciate you coming today. Really looking forward to checking out Weird Gods myself. Gave
Hmm.
me, I was reading the blurb, gave me some, American Gods, Neil Gaiman, Terry
There's a
Pratchett
big,
vibes,
there's
a lot of different things. Stargate, Atlantis, SG1. So really excited to check that out. I love the conglomeration and the stew, if you will, that you put together there. So I just do want to mention too to our audience again, our season 2 thing where we're really, really asking you to check out the description, check out Susanna's books. Please make sure after that, though, that if you are reading them, which we hope you do, please make sure you are reviewing her products, reviewing anybody's products, Audible, whatever it is, and anywhere really that you find it, even if it's not
Mhm.
on Amazon, for our reader or our authors. That way, they can find more readers. It's always one of the most helpful things, particularly for indie authors, but all authors.
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, Susanna, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you. If you have anything else you want to come on and talk about in the future, like I said, I'll be sending you an email, and we'll be
Mhm.
starting to send out some dates. So I do have a mythology seminar that we'll be doing with several authors. It's going to be 3 or 4, and then myself.
Mhm.
I don't know why 4 just sounds better. So we'll probably do about 2-hour sessions there, and we'll split up into 2 different episodes. So
That sounds
I'll
very
definitely put
interesting.
you down
Mhm.
for that one. So
Yeah.
be on the lookout for that, as well as the email I'll be sending you for this episode. But other than that, if there's something I can do to help you out, in the meantime, before this
I'll let
episode
you know.
airs, after, just get a hold of me on
Mhm.
Twitter, email. If you're starting a TikTok, let me know, and I'll be like, hey, these are really cool people to connect with and follow, things like that, and we'll help you out as best we can.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I love this chat. It was one of the best interviews I've had. I usually get very nervous.
Well,
Just talking makes me nervous,
yeah,
and no, it's been great. I love it. So
perfect.
I wish you all the success
Oh, you
uh,
as well.
with the podcast and with the book and with the upcoming newborn. That is quite so.
I appreciate it. I was a little worried, my mom, because we're naming him after my father-in-law, who unfortunately passed away before I could meet him. But
Mhm.
we my mom, so we had that picked for years, and then we're had a boy instead of a girl. So we're like, okay, well, Martin. Well, my mom was like, well, she does the name thing, and she does these really cool little art pieces that her friend makes. So they'll take the name and then what it means, and they'll do stuff about that. And so she sends me, I guess she was doing it for Christmas. So she sends me a message. She goes, "Oh my gosh." She goes, "This is going to be the perfect name for your son." And I said, "Why?" Because I always tease her that I wanted Ragnar Lothbrok. And my wife doesn't like that. So I always tease her. My buddies and I tease her. We said, "Well, we're going to call him that behind your back." Um, so my mom says, "Well, Martin means God of War." I was like, "Sold." So she goes, "I don't know
Excellent.
how to." She goes, "I don't know how to put that on this cute little baby thing." And I said, "I do." I said, "We'll put it in Dad's office, and when he's older, it'll be really funny." But yeah, so she's like, "I don't know how to make that cute little kid thing anymore." So I laughed really hard when she said that. So hopefully, yeah, hopefully he likes the mythology like I do. Otherwise, like it's
Uh,
gonna be a long writing that my friend goes, "Well, what if he
I'm
only
sure
likes
you will.
fiction?"
I'll
I'm
figure
like,
it out.
"Oh, don't do that to me." I was like, "He's got to like fantasy and sci-fi, at least somewhat, at least one of the fantastical ones." But thank you so much,
Mhm.
Susanna. I really
Thank you.
appreciate that. But yeah, if
Really
there's anything
enjoyed
else
it.
I can do, you just let me know. But other than
We'll keep in
that,
touch.
perfect,
Definitely. Yeah.
perfect, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day, and I will send you that email, and I will talk to you on social media, my friend.
Okay. Till then.
Have
Have
a
a
good
great
one.
Sunday.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.